solitude these past 18 years has now finally come to an end, as he will soon hear, "Petey, I'm home."
Now Jim Appel, Betty's other son.
Okay, although my mom passed away, a part of her will always remain with me, including her absent-mindedness, her overactive thyroid condition, and her high cholesterol. And to be honest, I'm really not grateful for those traits. But what I'm grateful for my mom was that she was truly a people person. You know, I've talked to a lot of her friends, and that's the way to describe her. And I'm happy I was able to adopt that trait. People who know me wonder how I got my sense of humor, and that I got from my dad. But what I got from my mom was a trait that I'll always treasure, her passion for meeting new people. She loved her family and loved her friends dearly, but she also loved meeting new people. For many years, she wrote a weekly column for the Los Alamitos paper called The Recipe Trading Post. And some of you have read it. She wrote that for probably over 20 years. And the way it was written, it would include a short story about someone, and then at the end of the column, there would be recipes, that person's favorite recipes. And the column was printed each week and was due on Monday. And I can't count how many times I was sitting in the kitchen on Sunday night, and she hadn't written the column yet. And so she'd be up till the wee hours in the morning coming up with the column. And they were always very good. I still have quite a few of them. And many times the column was about a family member or a friend, but oftentimes it was about someone that a week ago had been a complete stranger. Someone she had met for the first time the week before, started talking to, and came up with a story about that person, and included their favorite recipes. I remember reading her column, and sometimes I'd say, "Who is so-and-so? You know, I've never heard of them." And she would say, "I met them on a bus, or sitting on a bench at Seal Beach, or taking Tyler to the playground." And that's how she came up with some of her columns. She just met people, and they ended up in her column a week later. She had the ability to meet complete strangers, start up a conversation, and somehow turn it into a complete column. This is because she loved meeting people, and I realized that I enjoy the same thing. I enjoy meeting people, finding out about their lives, and I think it helps me grow as a person. And that is a trait that she gave me, and that's a trait I'll be forever grateful for. I want to share one quick story about my mom that kind of epitomizes the type of person she was. Back in the mid-1980s, I was working in the public defender's office. And I was in a murder trial in Santa Ana. And my parents came to the murder trial. They wanted to watch me in action. And so they showed up at the Santa Ana courthouse one day. And my mom always wanted me to be a district attorney. And she wanted me to prosecute people. And I always wanted to be a public defender. I wanted to defend people. So she'd always ask me when I was going to join the district attorney's office. And, you know, of course, I'd just ignore her, and eventually she'd stop bugging me. But they come to my trial, and the way the trial works is we start at 9 o'clock, and then at about 11 o'clock we have a recess. 15-minute recess, and gives the jurors a break. So the recess starts, and I'm sitting at counsel table, and all of a sudden, there's my mom. She walks up to me and starts talking to me. But of course, you know, before we'd exchanged a couple words, she starts talking to the DA. And they're all chatty and everything. And then she walks over and grabs my notebook, or my legal pad that I had been keeping notes on during the trial, takes it out of my hands, goes up to him, and starts writing down a recipe. So I'm like, okay, you know, I talked to her about that over lunch. I tell her, you know, that's kind of inappropriate. I'm in a pretty serious murder trial. You really got to kind of stay in the audience. So sure enough, we break till 1:30 for lunch, and we come back at 1:30. And we're in trial again till 3, and we take our afternoon recess, which is another 15 minutes. And we take that recess, and I'm talking to my client, And he's sitting to my right, and I'm looking at him, and he's staring over my shoulder. And he's looking intently at something. So I look over my shoulder, and there's my mom again. Somehow, she had gotten past the bailiff, who was protecting the courtroom, and was talking again to the DA. And I'm like, this has got to stop. So, I turn around, and this is the conversation she's having. Would you guys consider hiring my son? And sure enough, the next week, her column was a story about the district attorney and two of his favorite recipes. And that was my mother. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite up Gary Kovacic, Betty's son-in-law.
This is a nice crowd. Problem with being the last family member to speak is that some of the best stories have been already used. I'm going to have to edit on the fly. I was going to talk about Betty's comment at Kelly's defense of her dissertation at Stanford, but I think Jimmy's story is better, so I won't embarrass Betty or Kelly on that one. I knew Betty Appel for 45 years. Many of you didn't have the privilege to know her that long. Some of you knew her a lot longer. But whether your association with Betty spanned a lifetime as a friend from Cleveland, or the last several years as a caring caretaker in Altadena, you knew one undeniable fact: Betty Appel was unique. I would like to take a few moments to talk about the full measure of that uniqueness. I'm going to borrow a few lines I read when I was doing Pete Appel's eulogy. Betty and Pete were a loving couple, and Pete especially was very loving and patient. I do not have to remind some of you that Pete and Betty had very different personalities. Pete was calm, logical, and consistent. Betty Appel was the opposite. But as opposites, they were an ideal match because they loved each other very much. This love is the reason their marriage was so enduring. Betty was vocal. Even in an age before cell phones and other mobile devices, she always seemed to have a telephone in her ear. When the phone rang, Pete would invariably say, "Here we go." And when the phone didn't ring, Betty would fill the void by either calling someone from her mental Rolodex of numbers or engaging in conversation with anyone in the room. How did Pete survive this constant clamoring commotion? Well, he was a highly skilled individual, highly skilled in the fine art of selective listening, and a master of marital negotiations. He often chose to take a seat on the sidelines and just watch Betty in action. And as a result, for those many years, as husband and wife, Pete and Betty were a couple that complemented one another perfectly. An ample helping of accommodation blended with mutual appreciation and affection. Betty was also a devoted mother to her sons Stephen and Jim and her daughter Barb. You may find other siblings who are as dissimilar as these three, but I doubt it. Betty appreciated their differences and unique talents and took great pride in the lives they led. She never criticized their choices in life, offering instead unconditional support and acceptance. And her unconditional support and appreciation was returned in kind by her kids. I was obviously most aware of Barb's care and concern for her mom. Almost every day, Barb would call to speak with her mom and or her caregivers to find out how she was doing. And every week or so, they would go to lunch, sometimes with me in tow, to keep a conversation going. Now, it's true that some of those meals started with semi-successful efforts to gracefully lift Betty in and out of her car, or her wheelchair being outmaneuvered by a bump in the sidewalk. But even if Barb and her mom ended up in a heap on the ground, which they did a couple of times, both enjoyed the adventure, laughing richly rather than complaining about the incident. Betty was also an ideal grandmother. She simply and shamelessly adored her spoiled her grandchildren, Kelly, Casey, and Tyler. She learned to love her granddaughter-in-law, Anya, who she's met several times, and even had good thoughts about Ivan, who she met only once. Betty was overwhelmed by all of their accomplishments and delighted whenever they visited. The Appels are not generally a hugging family, but Betty loved her grandkids and loved to hug them all the time. Betty was also a caring aunt, cousin, mother-in-law, and friend. She was a bit, shall we say, inquisitive, always wanting to know what you were doing, how you were feeling. But with her inquiries, she made you feel like you were an important part of her family, of her life. She was a loyal patron, ready to defend her family and friends against any negative claims or complaints, accurate or not. When it came to those close to her, Betty's cup was always full. It overflowed. Betty's final departure was timely and peaceful. She had lived a fulfilling and meaningful life for almost 93 years. To the end, she was kind, generous, cheerful, loyal, and authentic. This is not to say that Betty was perfect. She could be a bit self-absorbed and persistent. As we discussed, she loved to talk. And we all know that she was, as we've heard is the word of the day, quirky. Now when I say quirky, I mean Betty was unconventional, exhibiting a rather eccentric mix of traits that ended up being enduring and charming. By word or action, she would often produce the unexpected, just weird enough to be interesting and amusing. How else would you explain being the author of a weekly recipe column, Recipe Trading Post, famously known for the regular retractions Betty had to publish the next week to amend the list of ingredients and correct mistaken measurements? Or speaking of food, her impulsive desire to serve a Thanksgiving pumpkin pie so rapidly that she shot her good friend Mark Sola in the face with canned whipped cream. And there was the time I went to pick Betty up after a hospital stay, only to find her walking down the hallway, fully dressed, but unknowingly dragging a wheeled IV stand behind her. She was ready to go, so she had quickly put on her coat over a left arm that still was hooked up to the drip lines. As we have heard this afternoon, these funny tales and curious quotes attributed to Betty are legion. Was there a common theme to all of this? Spontaneous, unexpected, unusual, or just plain quirky? Perhaps it was a sense of self that didn't perceive how others perceived her, or the delightful comfort of just being her own person. In the final analysis, Betty had the unfiltered ability to brighten the lives of others with her warm personality, sense of humor, and originality. Had Betty stopped to think about it, she would have published her own recipe for a life well lived. Laugh a lot, talk a lot, don't get too wrapped up in the details, and above all, embrace your family and friends with unconditional love and respect. It is a recipe tried and tested during her entire life that never needs to be modified or corrected. In closing, Betty Appel brought an innocent, natural goodness into all of our lives. And we will continue to be blessed by that goodness as long as we remember the unique content of her character and the remarkable quality of her life.
Finally, I'd like to close with some words that were written by Betty's daughter-in-law, Janet Bardell. Betty arrived in style with trumpets blaring. Angels began to sing her favorite songs. Doves were released into the air. Several cockatiels flew among them. Emotions were high with anticipation. Then, just as quickly, there was a hush in the air. Then, the moment was here. Betty walked through a cloud and into the light and was met by Pete, to her delight. A crowd grew around her and faces appeared, loved ones lost but always near. She was swept through the crowd and was whisked away to have dinner with Pete, Lucille, David, Rick, and of course, special guest, her parents, Leo and Henrietta Stein. Her mother hugged her until she could not breathe. Her father nodded and gave a slight heave. He asked her politely, "What took you so long?" Friends were waiting who she had cherished so long. They were gathered in song to let her know she had nothing to fear. Eternity awaits you. Events are arranged. You have been assigned to be Chief Gopher Club organizer. Let's jaunt to Paris, have dinner in Spain, and finish the night with ice cream in Maine. A slight smirk appeared on Betty's face. Her body betrayed her, and this she knew. There had been no jaunting with these feet, that's true. She wondered how silly her friends had become, but they gathered her up in a loving embrace, and off she went in due haste. She felt refreshed, her body renewed, her mind was racing, her assignment was clear. She must get to her phone and call all her friends she held so dear. Pete stood there smiling and shook his head. Nothing more needed to be said. I hope Betty looks down and sees our gathering today. We are sending her love in a celebratory way. Love you, miss you, Janet and Tyler. Jim and Tyler and the rest of the family put together a slideshow of some memories. Is this the little girl I carry? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall? Was it yesterday when they were small? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears. What words of wisdom can I give them? How can I help to ease their way? Now they must learn from one another, day by day. They look so natural together, just like two newlyweds should be. Is there a canopy in store for me? Sunrise, sunset, sunrise. to sunflowers blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. I invite you all to please rise for our memorial prayer, El Male Rachamim, and we'll remain standing as we close with our mourner's Kaddish. El Male Rachamim, Shochein Bameromim, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מצהירים את נשמת אלישבע בת ליאו והנריאלה שהלכה לעולמה, בעל הרחמים יסתיריה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה, אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. As together we say, we remain standing as we recite Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma tivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'vyomechon, v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei d'kusha b'richu. Le'elam min kol berchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom v'imrumav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Exalted and hallowed be God's name in the world which God created according to plan. May God's majesty be revealed in the days of our lifetime and the life of all Israel. Speedily, imminently, to which we say, Amen. Blessed be God's great name to all eternity. Blessed, praised, honored, exalted, extolled, glorified, adored, and lauded be the name of the Holy Blessed One, beyond all earthly words and songs of praise, blessing, and comfort, to which we say, Amen. May there be abundant peace from heaven and life for us and Israel, to which we say, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, as together we say, Amen. The family will make their way into the social hall, and they will greet you there. So I invite all the family to head into the social hall, and as they have left, then the rest of our community can head in there, and they will greet you there. Thank you all.